Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Taking a Breath podcast. Thanks for joining us. This week's episode, I've got Joel Henley joining me. He is a small business owner based here in Raleigh, specifically doing media for businesses, and he comes from a music production background and super excited to share. He's one of my longtime mentors and friends from Oasis Church, and so I'm super excited to share this with you guys. I hope you enjoy. So I'm excited because I want to dig a little bit into your background, and then we'll move kind of through and talk about the recent project as well. So what kind of got you started in this creative production, music, all that sort of background?
Yeah. I was always kind of musical growing up. My dad played guitar, and so music was kind of what started any kind of creativity for me, I guess. And then I started, I sang growing up, and then I started playing guitar when I was 13 in middle school, and just thought it'd be cool. Thought the girls would like, it or something. um, and but I really, started loving what I was doing. My great uncle bought me this little tape cassette recorder, multi-track recorder. So I would write songs on there and try to record and just do things like that. And then our youth group in middle school needed a worship leader. And I was kind of thrust into it, without really any experience or any qualifications. It's just like, hey, you play guitar and can kind of sing, so why don't you be the worship leader? And that seems like what most, people's experiences are. It's just kind of out of need. So then, so I started doing that in middle school, and then high school came, and moved into the high school worship leading position. And then there was a college program at my church that was called Interface. They were a band that traveled and recorded and did some things with the college program. So they asked me to come. I was 15 the first time I traveled with them, and that was kind of a fun experience. And then so I really from when I was like 15, 16 till I guess 23, 24, I was with Interface, and on and off kind of did traveling, recording, played in that worship team, and it was a crazy fun time. Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar, we had a portable church, so we basically had to wheel in everything that would go into like a church building. We had to wheel it in every Sunday morning, and for we would wheel in on these trailers, kids setups, kids environments, the whole like lobby area, tables, chairs, all the things. And then for our setting in the auditorium, we had obviously all the music stuff, the sound system, the lighting, the visuals, and it was quite an undertaking, and it grew over time. We started with pretty small setups, just kind of what we could carry in a small trailer, and we when I left Oasis, like full-time staff, we were at 3 trailers and one 24-foot trailer full of gear every Sunday that we would pull in just for the band and the auditorium. So it was a lot. There's quite a few logistics. I definitely couldn't have done it alone. And working as a team, I think was one of the cool things about that whole process. We had an amazing kind of organization person in Todd Davis, who in many ways, like, the church couldn't exist without. And he was just Bill's right hand man in terms of he's the executive pastor, and so he's like, okay, this is what we have to do now, how do we do it? And he's very gifted with that type of thing. So we had diagrams, we had we had plans, we had map timesheets of like, this is when we need to do this by, this is when. So going in with a plan was the best part. And then I think, um, when you're in a scenario where it's like stressful and there's a time crunch and you have to get things done and you just have to move on. I think that's typically where your kind of base personality comes out, or your um, how you deal with like pressure situations. Like, you don't really know until you are in that situation. So it's not necessarily something you can practice, but it's something you can learn from after the fact. So if you go through a high stress or something like that situation and you're like, wow, I kind of fell apart there, then that's something you can kind of learn from, and take notes and ask people, hey, what could I have done better? Is there anything that you needed from me in that moment that I wasn't providing? So just, being teachable, being open. I think, in some ways my personality is typically pretty relaxed, and even if I am internally freaking out, people can think that I'm just fine. So so there were quite a few times I was stressed out or frustrated, or any number of emotions. But I think just like, taking a breath, like, at the end of the day, something that I always held on to was like, um, my job was like to do my best to create like a worship environment where people could come, they could worship God. And I always felt like at the end of the day, if everything breaks, if everything falls apart, and it's just like somebody up there with an acoustic guitar, like, we could always fall back on that and God would always still move.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all dependent on us. Like, it was like, we can worship God in so many different ways. This just happens to be the way that we try to do it. And if that doesn't work out, if it doesn't happen, then that's okay. Like, we're still going to worship God. Like, we can still provide, God with praise in that moment. And yeah.
Thing.
So
Like, for someone who wants to, flex the creativity muscle or like work on that in themselves, like, what would you recommend? Like, how did you get started, whether it's, production or video specifically, which is what you're doing now? Like, what were those things that you initially started doing to get into it?
yeah, I mean, so I think that this time that we live in, with YouTube and Google and just so many things, Skillshare, and like, there's paid ways to learn things and there's free ways to learn things. But um, I think it's so incredible that, like, you can, like, I've had two careers in my life. I had some formal training with music, um, but I never got a degree in like worship pastor. Like, I did an internship and then I went right into it. Um, and so a lot of stuff along the way, I had to Google, I had to YouTube, I had to figure it out. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And then now I'm in a career where, again, like, I never had any formal training, I never had any degrees, never went to school for it. Like, 100% of what I know is from YouTube and
Insane.
from just figuring it out. And so that the opportunities that we have now with the internet and with YouTube and just so many things, especially if you're a visual learner, you can learn anything. Like, you can literally learn anything. And so if you find something, I think our generation kind of takes for granted the idea that we can do something and like love doing it. Because I think, like, even a generation or two generations ago, work was not always synonymous with something you love.
Hmm.
Like, it was like, work was very much like, you need to provide for your family, you need to get a job, and you need to like work there for 40 years and retire and have security, and that's all that there. That's the best that you can hope for. And maybe you can, on the weekends, have something that you can enjoy.
Right.
But like, now, in our modern context, like, we can combine something we love doing with providing for our family and making a living. And adding value to the world. So like, it's just, it's amazing and a privilege that you can do that. Because like, that's not always the case. That's not always the, case for everybody. Like, I've had jobs where I just had to get a job and just do
Yep.
it. Like, I worked at a bagel shop. It was the first job I could get when I moved to North Carolina.
Yep.
I was not a huge fan of it. Um, there's like, just being in the service industry, like cleaning toilets and cleaning up after messy people and slicing bagels and cutting my finger and, just all the things that go into being in the service industry. But I did it for a time and then, you know, kept learning and honing my skills to when I could one day, make a living doing something that I did love.
I love
Um,
it.
and so that was a big inciting reason for it. So yeah, I think just learning as much as you can. If you don't have an opportunity to do it full time yet, like, do it for free. Like, try to learn from someone that's doing it. Find someone that you know of that is doing what you want to do, and like, just offer to help them, offer to carry their stuff for them, or just, bring them coffee. Anything you can do to like get around people that are doing what you want to do.
Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. If you learned something new today, leave a comment and we would love to engage with you. Follow us on Instagram at Taking a Breath Podcast, and we'll see you next week for another episode.